Russian oil refineries have had another bad day on behalf of the Ukrainians, but they're going after more than just oil refineries. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about what's going on. Okay, so this is a story from the Kiev Independent, who actually has a pretty good inside track into scooping some of these stories where Ukraine launches deep strike attacks. Now, this was from last night. Right? And it targeted 4 refineries in Russia's Krasnodar Krai and Ashkartan Oblast. These are sites where one oil refinery is happening, oil refining, rather. And you guys know that is a key part of fueling Russia's war economy, right? As other countries, particularly India and China, sort of navigate their post-COVID return, the prospect of cheap oil is just too tempting to turn down. And so even though the U.S. is not pleased about it, India and China are still continuing to purchase Russian oil because it's being sold at a discount. And that, in turn, is funding the Russian war machine. And so Ukraine has made it a priority to target Russian oil. And again, the U.S. is not particularly pleased about this because when Russian oil refineries get hit, there is a significant or measurable blowback into the general oil market, right? Even though, remember, most Russian oil isn't being sold to most countries, the Russian oil purchased by India and China is consumption that or purchasing that isn't happening from other oil sources. So it still drives down price. And so what you have is basically the U.S. wants to see inflation, right? It's an election year. The administration is really worried about inflation. And when the Ukrainians crush Russian oil facilities, it's going to raise the cost of a barrel of oil, and therefore going to push inflation into basically all goods and services, because any good that moves via overland, via truck or via ship, depend on fuel oil to move it. So the cost of a barrel of oil sort of governs the entire economic system. Now, that doesn't stop Ukraine, though, because Ukraine has a war to win. And you can see that this strike is actually a pretty deep strike by Ukrainian standards, right? Here is the the Ashtarkhan Oblast. And you can see we're looking at, what looks like about 300 or 400 miles past Volgograd into the Caucasus region here. So a sign of, again, Ukraine really rolling out some of their deep strike capabilities. Now, Russia claims they shot down over 100 drones in a mass strike that spanned Crimea, Krasnodar Krai, and Volgograd oblasts. But it's not about the drones you shoot down, it's about the drones you don't. And that is what I think is always funny about these Russian statements, is that the Russians love to tell you what they did do, and this is a classic piece of Russian disinformation, but what they don't tell you about the drones that got through, right? It's like saying, listen, I didn't shoot anybody. Of the 15 bullets, 14 bullets I fired landed harmlessly, hit buildings. And then you go, well, what about the 15th? Don't worry about the 15th. That's nothing. That's not nothing. In this case, it's 4 major Russian oil refineries. When they're real close to the coast, you know that oil is going to be heading to Russian shipping infrastructure to be moved out and sold elsewhere. But that's not all that they've gone after. And we're going to talk in a second about why Ukraine also chose these sites. But first, of course, if you want to enhance your own operation, maybe you want to work out a little harder, focus a little more at the gym, or just need to pick me up in the middle of the day, Strike Gum, the zero sugar energy drink alternative. 90 milligrams caffeine in every piece, as much as a Red Bull, as much as an Amp Energy. Made here in the USA by Liquid Core. And it uses the highest quality ingredients, right? We use natural caffeine derived from green coffee beans, not any of the weird lab-grown encapsulated stuff, right? It's not made overseas, and it's veteran-owned by this veteran. So you can pick some up at strikegum.com or on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and search Strike Gum. Thanks. Okay. So this is, I thought, even more interesting. And I'm going to see if I can find it here. And that is that there was other targets in this wave of drone attacks. Notably, some of the sites were actually where Russian Shahed drones were being stored prior to deployment on to the front line. And it literally, their intel was so precise, they said these drones were actually stored overnight in these locations. So that meant that even though they were going to be moved very quickly, the Ukrainians still managed to put drones into those targets. Ukrainian forces also targeted Russian radar stations, electronic intelligence centers in Bryansk and Crimea. Now, this is these drone storage facilities, which also included training buildings and command and communication centers, were in Krasnodar Krai that were hit. So you can see how there's an advantage here. Right? A very logical advantage to this. Let's see if we can pull this up real quick. We'll get there it was. Right. So here's, oh yeah, this tracks. Here's Krasnodar Krai. You can see it's right across from Crimea. And for Ukraine, you can see the obvious appeal here of a massed drone attack targeting, right, where the drones come in mass from somewhere like, Zaporizhzhia, cross over occupied Ukraine, and then get into Krasnodar, and they look like a mass drones. And because there's so many specific targets here, sometimes very close together, two of the refineries were just 10 kilometers apart, makes it really hard for the Russians to determine who is under attack, right? They don't find out who's under attack until the drones are just mere minutes away. And that, I think, is a key part of sort of the deception aspect of these drone attacks, or these massed drone attacks, where even when there's a high attrition rate, right? Let's say the Russians shot down 85% of the drones. They didn't know who exactly was being targeted until the drones changed their trajectory and finalized their route to the target. This is my thesis. And apparently, some of these oil refineries have been burning for a long time, almost an entire day. One fire at an oil depot. This is an earlier strike that hit June 18th. So it burned for 3 days in these oil storage facilities. So this is really a sign, I think, that Russian air defenses are not up to par. And more importantly, that Ukraine really feels like there's some serious return in targeting Russian oil infrastructure. And the thing that makes Russian oil infrastructure targeting so valuable isn't just the fact that it deals a strategic blow to Russia. It's that oil pulled out of the ground can't really do anything. And a lot of countries don't have their own refining capacity. Why? Because it's not worth it, right? India doesn't need to refine its own oil because it's not going to pull it out, right? So instead, a country like Russia sits there and goes, listen, if we're going to sell crude oil, we might as well learn to refine it ourselves. We'll be able to charge a higher price. It'll cost us less. So you have Russia running these refineries, but when you have this process that's a chain, any disruption to any part of the chain functionally shuts down the rest of it, everything below the chain. So when you disable a refinery, it's as if you took out temporarily all the oil wells pumping oil that were supposed to be refined in that refinery. Now, sometimes you can divert things and send it to refineries that are functioning, but a lot of times your capacity is your capacity. And you don't have the ability to refine any more oil faster from these sites. So the downstream effects to the Russian economy are actually pretty substantial. Anyway, guys, thank you so much to our Colonel tier members. Thanks to our Lieutenant tier members. And thanks to our all the members of Combat Vet News. Could not do it without you guys. Be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Cheers.